This is going to be The Road, Part 2, pages 18 to 33. You can follow along if you'd like. In dreams, his pale bride came to him out of a green and leafy canopy. Her nipples pipe-clayed and her rib bones painted white. She wore a dress of gauze, and her dark hair was carried up in combs of ivory, combs of shell. Her smile, her downturned eyes. But in the morning it was snowing again, and beads of small gray ice strung along the light wires overhead. He mistrusted all of that. He said the right dreams for a man in peril were dreams of peril, and all else was a call of languor and death. He slept little, and he slept poorly. He dreamt of walking in a flowering wood, where birds flew before them. He and the child and the sky was aching blue, but he was learning how to wake himself from just such siren worlds. Lying there in the dark with the uncanny taste of a peach from some phantom orchard fading in his mouth. He thought if he lived long enough, the world at last would all be lost. Like the dying world the newly blind inhabit, all of it slowly fading from memory. From daydreams on the road, there was no waking. He plodded on. He could remember everything of her save her scent. Seated in a theater with her beside him, leaning forward, listening to the music, gold scrollwork and sconces and the tall, columnar folds of the drapes at either side of the stage. She held his hand in her lap, and he could feel the tops of her stockings through the thin stuff of her summer dress. Freeze this frame. Now call down your dark and your cold, and be damned. He fashioned sweeps from 2 old brooms he'd found, and wired them to the cart to clear the limbs from the road in front of the wheels, and he put the boy in the basket and stood on the rear rail like a dog musher, and they set off down the hills, guiding the cart on the curves with their bodies in the manner of bobsledders. It was the first that he'd seen the boy smile in a long time. At the crest of the hill was a curve and a pull-out in the road, an old trail that led off through the woods. They walked out and sat on a bench and looked out over the valley where the land rolled away into the gritty fog. A lake down there, cold and gray and heavy in the scavenged bowl of the countryside. "What is that, Papa?" "It's a dam." "What's it for?" "It made the lake. Before they built the dam, that was just a river down there. The dam used the water that ran through it to turn big fans called turbines that would generate electricity." "To make lights?" "Yes, to make lights." "Can we go down there and see it?" "I think it's too far." "Will the dam be there a long time?" "I think so. It's made out of concrete. It will probably be there for hundreds of years, thousands even." "Do you think there could be fish in the lake?" "No. There's nothing in the lake." In that long ago, somewhere very near this place, he'd watched a falcon fall down the long blue wall of the mountain and break with the keel of its breastbone the midmost from a flight of cranes and take it to the river below, all gangly and wrecked and trailing its loose and blousy plumage in the still autumn air. The grainy air, the taste of it never left your mouth. They stood in the rain like farm animals. Then they went on, holding the tarp over them in the dull drizzle. Their feet were wet and cold, and their shoes were being ruined. On the hillsides, old crops dead and flattened. The barren ridgeline trees raw and black in the rain. And the dreams so rich in color. How else would death call you? Waking in the cold dawn, it all turned to ash instantly, like certain ancient frescoes entombed for centuries suddenly exposed to the day. The weather lifted, and the cold, and they came at last into the broad lowland river valley, the pieced farmlands still visible, everything dead to the root along the barren bottomlands. They trucked along on the black top. Tall clapboard houses, machine-rolled metal roofs, a log barn in a field with an advertisement and faded 10-foot letters across the roof slope. See Rock City. The roadside hedges were gone to rows of black and twisted brambles. No sign of life. He left the boy standing in the road holding the pistol while he climbed an old set of limestone steps and walked down the porch of the farmhouse, shading his eyes and peering in the windows. He let himself in through the kitchen. Trash on the floor, old newsprint, china in a break front, cups hanging from their hooks. He went down the hallway and stood in the door to the parlor. There was an antique pump organ in the corner, a television set, cheap stuffed furniture together with an old handmade cherrywood chifferobe. He climbed the stairs and walked through the bedrooms. Everything was covered with ash. A child's room with a stuffed dog on the windowsill looking out at the garden. He went through the closets. He stripped back the beds and came away with 2 good woolen blankets and went back down the stairs. In the pantry were 3 jars of home-canned tomatoes. he blew the dust from the lids and studied them. Someone before him had not trusted them, and in the end neither did he, and he walked out with the blankets over his shoulder, and they set off along the road again. On the outskirts of the city, they came to a supermarket, a few old cars in the trash-strewn parking lot. They left the cart in the lot and walked the littered aisles. In the produce section in the bottom of the bins, they found a few ancient runner beans and what looked to have once been apricots, long dried to wrinkled effigies of themselves. The boy followed behind. They pushed out through the rear door, and in the alleyway behind the store a few shopping carts, all badly rusted. They went back through the store again, looking for another cart, but there were none. By the door were two soft drink machines that had been tilted over onto the floor and opened with a pry bar. Coins everywhere in the ash. He sat and ran his hand around in the works of the gutted machines, and in the second one it closed over a cold metal cylinder. He withdrew his hand slowly and sat looking at a Coca-Cola. "What is it, Papa?" "It's a treat. For you." "What is it?" "Here, sit down." He slipped the boy's knapsack straps loose and set the pack on the floor behind him, and he put his thumbnail under the aluminum clip on the top of the can and opened it. He leaned his nose to the slight fizz coming from the can and handed it to the boy. "Go ahead," he said. The boy took the can. "It's bubbly," he said. "Go ahead." He looked at his father, then tilted the can and drank. He sat there thinking about it. "It's really good," he said. "Yes, it is." "You have some, Papa." "I want you to drink it." "You have some." He took the can and sipped it and handed it back. "You drink it," he said. "Let's just sit here." "It's because I won't ever get to drink another one, isn't it?" "Ever's a long time." "Okay," said the boy. By dusk of the day following, they were at the city. The long concrete sweeps of the interstate exchanges like the ruins of a vast funhouse against the distant murk. He carried the revolver in his belt at the front and wore his parka unzipped. Mummy dead everywhere. The flesh cloven along the bones, the ligaments dried to tug and taut as wires. Shriveled and drawn like latter-day bog folk, their faces of boiled sheeting, yellowed palings of their teeth. They were discalced to a man like pilgrims of some common order, for all their shoes were long since stolen. They went on. He kept constant watch behind him in the mirror. The only thing that moved in the streets was the blowing ash. They crossed a high concrete bridge over the river. A dock below. Small pleasure boats half sunken in the gray water. Tall stacks downriver, dim in the soot. The day following, some few miles south of the city, at a bend in the road and half lost in the dead brambles, they came upon an old frame house with chimneys and gables and a stone wall. The man stopped. Then he pushed the cart up the drive. "What is this place, Papa?" "It's the house where I grew up." The boy stood looking at it. The peeling wooden clapboards were largely gone from the lower walls, for firewood leaving the studs and the insulation exposed. The rotted screening from the back porch lay on the concrete terrace. "Are we going in?" "Well, why not?" "I'm scared." "Don't you want to see where I used to live?" "No." "It'll be okay." "There could be somebody here." "I don't think so." "But suppose there is?" He stood looking up at the gable to his old room. He looked at the boy. "Do you want to wait here?" "No, you always say that." "I'm sorry." "I know, but you do." They slipped out of their backpacks and left them on the terrace and kicked their way through the trash in the porch and pushed into the kitchen. The boy held on to his hand, all much as he'd remembered it. The room's empty. In the small room off the dining room there was a bare iron cot, a metal folding table. The same cast iron coal grate in the small fireplace. The pine paneling was gone from the walls, leaving just the furring strips. He stood there. He felt with his thumb in the painted wood of the mantel the pinholes from tacks that held stockings 40 years ago. "This is where we used to have Christmas when I was a boy." He turned and looked out at the waste of the yard, a tangle of dead lilac, the shape of a hedge. On cold winter nights when the electricity was out in a storm, we would sit at the fire here, me and my sisters, doing our homework. The boy watched him. Watched shapes claiming him he could not see. "We should go, Papa," he said. "Yes," the man said, but he didn't. They walked through the dining room where the fire brick in the hearth was as yellow as the day it was laid because his mother could not bear to see it blackened. The floor buckled from the rainwater, In the living room, the bones of a small animal, dismembered, placed in a pile. Possibly a cat. A glass tumbler by the door. The boy gripped his hand. He went up the stairs and turned and went down the hallway. Small cones of damp plaster standing in the floor. The wooden lathes of the ceiling exposed. He stood in the doorway to his room. A small space under the eaves. This is where I used to sleep. My cot was against this wall. In the nights in their thousands to dream the dreams of child imaginings, worlds rich or fearful, such as might offer themselves, but never the one to be. He pushed open the closet door, half expecting to find his childhood things. Raw, cold daylight fell through from the roof, gray as his heart. We should go, Papa. Can we go? Yeah, we can go. I'm scared. I know. I'm sorry. I'm really scared. It's all right. We shouldn't have come. 3 nights later in the foothills of the eastern mountains, he woke in the darkness to hear something coming. He lay with his hands at either side of him. The ground was trembling. It was coming toward them. Papa, the boy said. Papa. Shh. It's okay. What is it, Papa? It neared, growing louder, everything trembling. Then it passed beneath them like an underground train and drew away into the night and was gone. The boy clung to him, crying, his head buried against his chest. Shh, it's all right. I'm so scared. I know, it's all right. It's gone. What was it, Papa? It was an earthquake. It's gone now. We're all right. Shh. In those first years, the roads were peopled with refugees, shrouded up in their clothing, wearing masks and goggles, sitting in their rags by the side of the road like ruined aviators, their barrels heaped with shoddy, towing wagons or carts, their eyes bright in their skulls, creedless shells of men tottering down the causeways like migrants in a fever land. The frailty of everything revealed at last. Old and troubling issues resolved into nothingness and night. The last instance of a thing takes the class with it, turns out the light, and is gone. Look around you. Ever is a long time. But the boy knew what he knew, that ever is no time at all. He sat by a gray window in the gray light in an abandoned house in the late afternoon and read old newspapers while the boy slept. The curious news, the quaint concerns. At 8 the primrose closes. He watched the boy sleeping. Can you do it when the time comes? Can you? They squatted in the road and ate cold rice and cold beans they'd cooked days ago, already beginning to ferment. No place to make a fire that would not be seen. They slept huddled together in the rank quilts in the dark and the cold. He held the boy close to him. So thin. My heart, he said, my heart. But he knew that if he were a good father, still, it might be as well as she had said. That the boy was all that stood between him and death. Later in the year, he hardly knew the month. He thought they had enough food to get through the mountains, but there was no way to tell. The pass at the watershed was 5,000 feet, and it was going to be very cold. He said that everything depended on reaching the coast, yet waking in the night he knew that all this was empty, and there was no substance to it. There was a good chance they would die in the mountains, and that would be that. They passed through the ruins of a resort town and took the road south. Burnt forests for miles along the slopes, and snow sooner than he would have thought. No tracks in the road, nothing living anywhere. The fire-blackened boulders like the shapes of bears on the starkly wooded slopes. He stood on a stone bridge where the water slurred into a pool and turned slowly into gray foam. Where once he'd watched trout swaying in the current, checking their perfect shadows on the stones beneath. They went on, the boy trudging in his track, leaning into the cart, winding slowly upward through the switchbacks. There were fires still burning high in the mountains, and at night they could see the light from them, deep orange in the soot fall. It was getting colder, but they had campfires all night and left them burning behind them when they set out again in the morning. He'd wrapped their feet in sacking tied with cord, and so far the snow was only a few inches deep, but he knew that if it got much deeper, they would have to leave the cart. Already it was hard going, and he stopped often to rest. Slacking to the edge of the road with his back to the child, where he stood bent with his hands in his knees, coughing. He raised up and stood with weeping eyes, and the gray snow, a fine mist of blood. They camped against a boulder, and he made a shelter of poles with the tarp. He got a fire going, and they set about dragging up a great brush pile of wood to see them through the night. They'd piled a mat of dead hemlock boughs over the snow, and they sat and wrapped in their blankets, watching the fire and drinking the last of the cocoa scavenged weeks before. It was snowing it again, soft flakes drifting down out of the blackness. He dozed in the wonderful warmth. The boy's shadow crossed over him, carrying an armload of wood. He watched him stoke the flames. God's own fire drake. The sparks rushed upward and died in the starless dark. Not all dying words are true, and this blessing is no less real for being shorn of its ground. He woke toward the morning with the fires down to coals and walked out to the road. Everything was alight, as if the lost sun were returning at last. Snow orange and quivering. A forest fire was making its way along the tinderbox ridges above them, flaring and shimmering against the overcast like the northern lights. Cold as it was, he stood there a long time. The color of it moved something in him long forgotten. Make a list, recite a litany, remember. It was colder. Nothing moved in that high world. A rich smell of wood smoke hung over the road. He'd pushed the cart on through the snow, a few miles each day. He'd no notion how far the summit might be. They ate sparely, and they were hungry all the time. He stood looking out over the country, a river far below. How far had they come? In his dreams, she was sick, and he cared for her. The dream bore the look of sacrifice, but he thought differently. He did not take care of her, and she died, alone somewhere in the dark. And there's no other dream, nor other waking world, and there's no other tale to tell. On this road there are no God-spoke men. They're gone, I'm left. They have taken with them the world. Query: How does the never to be differ from what never was? Dark of the invisible moon. The night's now only slightly less black. By day the banished sun circles the earth like a grieving mother with a lamp. People sitting on the sidewalk in the dawn, half immolant and smoking in their clothes, like failed sectarian suicides. Others would come to help them. Within a year there were fires on the ridges and deranged chanting, the screams of murdered, by day the dead impaled on spikes along the road. What had they done? He thought that in the history of the world it might even be that there was more punishment than crime, but he took small comfort from it. The air grew thin, and he thought the sun could not be far. Perhaps tomorrow? Tomorrow came and went. It didn't snow again, but the snow in the road was 6 inches deep, and pushing the cart up those grades was exhausting work. He thought they would have to leave it. How much could they carry? He stood and looked out over the barren slopes. The ash fell on the snow till it was all but black. At every curve it looked as though the pass lay just ahead, and then one evening he stopped and looked all about, and he recognized it. He unsnapped the throat of his parka, lowered the hood, and stood listening. The wind and the dead black stands of hemlock, the empty parking lot at the overlook. The boy stood beside him, where he'd stood once with his own father in a winter long ago. "What is it, Papa?" the boy said. "It's the gap. This is it."